Hi, my name is Dan Hermstad, and I'm with the RCD of Santa Cruz County. This video is to show you how to check the pressure in your drip irrigation system. Now, this is important because if your pressure is too low or if it's too high, you end up with uneven irrigation all across this field. That means you get higher or lower yields depending on what your irrigation is at, and overall, that is not what we want from our fields. Most growers will irrigate longer to make sure all plants get water if they have an area with low pressure, and by making sure pressure is uniform across the whole field, we can help save water by putting on just how much irrigation the crop needs and not anymore. So we are here in the Pajaro Valley of California. We're looking at a strawberry crop, relatively young. What we're talking about today will be really relevant for any other crops or ranches that are in a similar location, similar cropping system. So even though the crops may change, fresh vegetable and berry crops, you can apply these principles to all of those types. So you can measure pressure in your field using a standard pressure gauge. It looks like this. It's just your standard gauge you would use to check the pressure on your tires, for example. We'll use this and check pre-installed points throughout the field that contain Schrader valves, and we'll show you what the Schrader valve looks like. It's that same stem coming out of your car tire. Those points do need to be pre-installed in the field, and take a look at our other video that talks more about Schrader valves and how to install those. All right, the next thing we need to talk about is where you're going to check your pressure. You can't just do it in one spot. That will only give you the pressure in that one spot. You want to think of how the water flows into your blocks. So it enters in the middle often with a submain going each direction and the water flowing down the drip lines like this. Luckily in our area, most of our crops are grown in blocks that are squares or rectangles. And if you check the pressure at each of those points of the squares or rectangles, you'll get a good understanding of the range of pressures in your entire block. Something to keep in mind is you want to measure the pressure right where it enters the block. You also want to measure it at the furthest distance from where the water enters the block. So that means here we've got a gate valve in the middle of the block, a sub-main running both directions from there that feed the drip lines that go down our beds. If you go to the very end of the sub-main and the very end of those drip lines, that will be the point that's most hydraulically distant from the entry of the water into the block. Getting a reading there at that furthest point and right where the water enters the block will give you the most extreme ranges of pressure that you should be seeing there. So you'll get your highest and lowest pressure readings at those points. So today, we're going to go look at those 4 corners of the block to help us understand and see the whole range of pressure valves. Let's go take a look at a Schrader valve that we've installed in the field and take some measurements to show you how this gets started. All right, so this is one style of Schrader valve we've installed on the sub-main. You can see it's just a barb fitting with a length spaghetti hose and a Schrader involved on some PVC fittings. The pressure gauge. I'm just going to squarely fit the gauge fitting onto the Schrader valve, and you can see the face go up on the pressure gauge. So here we're getting about, on the pressure gauge, so here we're getting about almost 15 psi in pressure. All right, so now that we've checked our first pressure point at the entrance to the block, let's go ahead and check the other one. All right, I've got my other Schrader valve set up here. I will take another reading at this point. And I will write it down in my notebook. Let's go to the next point. Now we're at the beginning of the other end of the block, the beginning of the drip tape that's at the other end. So these are the heads of the beds. Again, our Schrader valve's installed. And here we're at about 8 here as well. All right, now we've got the pressure readings at the heads of our beds on either end of the block, the most extreme ends of the block. Let's check the ends of the drip tape. That's where we should have the lowest pressure values. Let's go see. All right, notice the Schrader valve slightly different here, the fitting with the Schrader valve at the end of the drip tape. I'll go ahead and take our reading here. And we're staying right at 10. Last point. Let's go check the last one. All right, last point. This is the other end of the block opposite one we just checked. Again, it's a tail. It's the end of the drip tape, the end of the bed. Let's see what we're getting here. Also 10. Okay, awesome. So this field is very uniform pressures. We got 8 or 10 at the top of the beds, as well as 10 at the bottom. Virtually no pressure loss, very little. Everything in between, because we know that these points are the most hydraulically distant, they're the furthest from where the water enters the block. Everything in the between should be within those ranges, or should be uniform, as we saw here. And that's a quick and easy way to check your, not only your irrigation pressure on your drip system, but to then learn how uniform and the water is you're applying to your crop. Thank you.